Hello and welcome once again to India Today's biannual tracker Mood of the Nation, brought to you with CVoter, bringing you all the data. We've already gone through all the big political findings that have created quite a stir, because remember, in our first part of the program, which we did on Thursday, we gave you a sense of what would happen if general elections were held today.
Rajdeep, I was at the B20 event this morning, and most of the people I met, and there were lots in that room where this mega international conclave was being held, said that they'd watched the India Today Mood of the Nation last evening. So phenomenal reach, phenomenal amplification, and a lot of interest in the results of the Mood of the Nation opinion poll.
Not surprising, general elections are just about 8 months away, so a lot of interest in who would win the elections if they were held today. That's what we told you on Thursday. Rahul Kanwal will tell you exactly what our data tells you.
Let's for a moment take you through the methodology adopted by CVoter in doing this poll for India Today. Remember, there is a mix of the tracker which CVoter does on a continuing basis. For this poll, 25,951 respondents were surveyed in all 28 states. Apart from this, there were about 1,34,000 respondents as part of a continuing annual tracker, and that gives a total sample size of a very robust 1,60,000 respondents, which really does give you a sense of which way the national political winds are blowing. Let's start by quickly recapping everything that we've shown you so far and giving you a sense of what may happen if general elections were held at this moment. The big ticket picture here is that CVoter is predicting for India today that if elections were held at this moment, the NDA alliance will be at 306. That's 46 down from their last tally. The India alliance would be at 193. That is 102 up from the previous tally. Others would be at 44, and part of the reason for that is that some of them have moved into the India bucket. That's 51 down from the last time. If it comes to vote share, the NDA is likely to bag 43% of the vote share. That's 2% down from the last time. The India alliance, 41% of the vote share. That's 14% up from the last time. So it looks as if the India alliance is really gaining votes, but that's not really translating into too many seats being lost by the NDAs, because arithmetically, as these parties come together, it does give them a boost in their vote share. Others at 16%, down 12%. When it comes to the party-wise breakup, the Bharatiya Janata Party comfortably positioned above the halfway mark of 272. CVoter predicting for India today that the BJP would get 287 seats, down 16 from the last time. The Congress at 74 seats, up 22 from the last time. Others at 182, down 6 from the last time. The Congress's vote share more or less stays where it was. The BJP's vote share goes up, which is admirable because they're 37%, a very high base already. They seem to be able to increase that. Others at 42. So the overall picture, Rajdeep, seems to be that while the headline
numbers hold in May of 2024, it means that Narendra Modi will have done what only Jawaharlal Nehru has done in the past, win 3 consecutive
and he didn't want to do
Lok
things
Sabha
like
elections.
Nehru. Nothing that he wants to do is like Nehru.
Well, the
but
belief is he wants to go beyond Nehru. Remember, Nehru was Prime Minister for 17 years, 47 to 1964. If Mr. Modi wins again, he will be Prime Minister for 15, but we don't know. All of this, remember, is as of August 2023. As of now, Mr. Modi clearly in pole position. What will April, May bring? 8 months can be a long time in politics. What we're going to do is now focus on what will happen in the next few months. In fact, in the next few days, because remember, we've just seen Chandrayaan becoming the big story of this week and India being recognized as a space superpower. Now, India will be at the high table presiding over G20. The G20 summit, and will that also become another occasion for the Prime Minister to project brand India? Just take a look, therefore, at what the survey says when it comes to opinion on India's presidency of G20, the meeting starting on the 8th of September. Will it enhance global stature? 47% say yes. Will it be poll propaganda? 26% say yes. It will be poll propaganda, will make no difference, is 15%. And if I just link it to the other two questions that you posed in that context, opinion on Modi government's foreign policy. Excellent was 55% in January 2023. It's up to 48%. It's down to 48% now. Good is 22. Add the two, it is a healthy 70%. 70% say Mr. Modi's foreign policy is good or excellent. Poor is 9% now, down from 14 last time. Very poor, 6% last time, 15% now. So Rahul, clearly, when we actually asked the question, the final question in this set, has Mr. Modi's prime ministerial stature increased globally? 61% say yes, 31% say no. So when you look at the BJP's numbers, BJP is at about 43% or NDA at 43%, but when it comes to Prime Minister Modi's global stature, 61% think he's enhanced it. So clearly, the global factor does play a role in building Mr. Modi's personality.
So does foreign policy play a role in electoral politics, or are the two divorced? To talk about the responses on foreign policy, we're joined on this broadcast by the lead psephologist at CVoter, Yashwant Deshmukh. He led the team that brought this data together for India Today. We have Geeta Mohan, our foreign affairs editor. She has a tough few weeks ahead of her as the world descends, or the biggest leaders of the world descend in the capital. With us from the Bharatiya Janata Party, its foreign policy ace in charge of the Foreign Affairs Department of the party, Vijay Chauthaiwala, Salman Soz, national spokesperson of the Congress, and for a diplomatic MEA perspective, we have former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, Vivek Kharju. So I want to go to Yashwant first on this perception that Prime Minister Modi's stature has increased globally. The immediate next question, even though foreign policy isn't directly linked to domestic politics, will all of what we're seeing in the G20 give the PM and the BJP a bump in the Lok Sabha elections next year? What's your view?
I think the bump comes from the overall confidence or overall feel-good factor, if one may say so. So all these foreign policy issues, all the good things that are happening, including Chandrayaan, if one may add so, you know, it's not about taking the credit, it's not about whether or not they will make any difference as far as the Lok Sabha elections are concerned, Rahul. I think it will just probably add to the feel-good factor of the good things in general that people might be thinking that they are watching under Mr. Modi's rule. Having said that, let's be very, very, honest here on this one thing that, public has been very, very open and critical about the government and the things where they feel that the government has failed. So in this same poll, there are things which the public has said very clearly. This is not something which the government has done right. We are not. But overall, they are very clear. They are looking at the Prime Minister who is working hard. They appreciate that the Prime Minister is going out of the way to take India to some positioning at the global level, which they feel they haven't seen in recent past.
Vijay
and they are appreciating that.
Interestingly, 47% of the respondents seem to think that the G20 presidency will enhance India's global stature because of the manner in which so many G20 events were done nationwide, so many cities, so much people's participation. That message seems to have gone home, because usually it's just a summit meeting, leaders come and go. But because of the kind of energy and equity that the Prime Minister and the government have invested in G20, is that something that you're doing purely from a foreign policy lens, or are you, in a subterranean fashion also hoping to benefit electorally?
Rahul, one thing is very clear, that any aim of the foreign policy can be appropriate projection of India as a whole country to the global audience. And G20 is a very opportune time to do so, which Prime Minister Modi, his government and the entire Indian people have done it very meticulously by such a massive planning and very impeccable execution of more than 200 events. And most importantly, it didn't remain only a Sarkari event, but also a lot of Janabhagidari, what Prime Minister Modi calls it, people's participation. And it is but natural that all these effects will have a positive effect in the minds of Indian voters, and it is being reflected in your opinion poll. So I am not at all surprised by this.
Salman shows generally foreign policy had a bipartisan consensus. That consensus seems to have broken down in recent times, whether it's on China, on other contentious issues. There's a general sense that the opposition is gunning for the government. Will G20 be different? Will G20 be an occasion in a way to celebrate for the opposition along with the government, or do you believe this is event management Narendra Modi style?
Rajdeep, on foreign policy, I think, I don't agree that there isn't consensus. Of course, when it comes to foreign policy, whether you're from the BJP or the Congress, we're all together in this. And as far as the country is concerned, we have to look out for the national interest. And that is what all political parties ultimately want. As far as the G20 is concerned, I know in your poll, people, said weighed in on what it might mean. But frankly, you know it, I know it, even I don't really know ultimately what the key goals of our presidency are, so much less, people were just responding to your survey. So I think that's a complicated kind of question to ask. But in the broader scheme of things, India being the G20 president, that's of course a good thing. Of course, this is a routine thing. Indonesia was president before us. Brazil will be president after we are done. Now, but there are differences, and the differences don't have anything to do with foreign policy per se. They have to do with how the government is engaging and how transparent the government is with the people of the country. Because we, the citizens, have a right to know how, if there are any threats to our national security.
Interestingly,
and of course,
the word there, Rajdeep, is routine. The Congress is trying to make the point, and Salman just slipped it in, that this is routine. Vivek Khaju, one, you can say that it's 20 countries, the presidency does rotate, and therefore, to that extent, Salman is correct in saying that it's routine. But the Prime Minister gave Business Today an interview which comes out tomorrow, where he essentially says this will be the catalyst of a new world order. So he's not thinking of this as being routine. He's thinking of this as a pivotal moment in the arc of India's evolution as a major global power, where he thinks this will be a springboard for what he's calling a new world order. So he's not thinking of this like Salman does as routine.
2 points, Rahul. One, I think we are in an era of what I would like to call the new diplomacy. And Prime Minister Modi is using the instrumentalities of this new diplomacy extremely shrewdly and well, both to project India as well as to gain popularity at home. I think these are twin objectives, and he's achieving these substantially. This is, as you've correctly noted, a rotational presidency. So to that extent, it was a routine issue, but he's transformed it far from routine by taking the G20 presidency events nationwide, and this was unprecedented. Now, the second aspect with regard to this being transformative, to that, my own submission is that the overarching reality of the present international order is the rivalry between China, a rising China, and the United States and its allies. In that process, India is trying to position itself as the voice of the global South. Now, this is not the first time in our diplomatic history that we've tried to do so. Earlier, the global South was called the developing world. And India, right from the time of Prime Minister Nehru to Indira Gandhi and later, was a major factor in the developing world. But Mr. Modi and his advisors have given this a new shape. And I think the difficulties that will come in the one more sentence, the difficulties that will come in the way of achieving, say, consensus on the Ukraine issue in the G20, they are seeking to bypass it by projecting India as the champion of the global South and raising the issues which are deeply concerning the global South, whether they be relating to the outcomes of the Ukraine war or even otherwise. So I think
Let me bring in Geeta Mohan on that. You know, Geeta, there is a sense that Prime Minister Modi from day one decided, I'm going to make this a pan-India event. It's not just about what happens between the 8th and 10th of September when the heads of state come, but I'm going to make it an annual pan-India event, take it from Nagaland to Goa, hold events right across the year. Was that, do you see that as an objective that this government has fulfilled, and was that the political messaging that was sent out there, that this is not just another routine diplomatic event, this is India showcasing itself to the world? Was that the message, and do you really think that that objective has been achieved?
Well, I think in many ways the objective of the Indian administration was, one, putting India on the global map, which they did wonderfully, 200 meetings across India, more than 50 cities, but also it was a little political in nature, keeping all the elections in mind, ensuring that they're not holding events in the states that are holding elections or having elections to stay away from controversy, yet having it in cities like Srinagar, which is not just domestic politics, but also across the border, sending out the message to our neighborhood. So there was a lot of messaging all through the year. But in terms of deliverables, like Ambassador Kachu said, it's the outcome document. The biggest challenge for India, Rajdeep, is going to be the outcome document and consensus on the outcome document. India did a wonderful job in Indonesia, pressing upon all leaders to get that statement in where it says it's not an era of war. But today, Russia is objecting to that. China is objecting to everything that is an Indian initiative, whether it is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, millets, or for that matter, India's own proposal for women's empowerment statement. So the biggest challenge will be whether if there will be an outcome document or footnotes.
You know, it's interesting. While that is what the foreign policy watchers will look at, the average voter is not looking at that. The average voter is identifying Mr. Modi with G20. You go across the country anywhere, Mr. Modi's photograph is there on every hoarding. So he's personalized it. And the last time, you know, something like this happened, 1983, Indira Gandhi did NAM in the first half of the year and then did Chogam in the second half of the year. But by 1984, barely 6 months later, she was in serious political trouble. So what happened?
There is no comparison between NAM and G20. G20 is 80% of the world's GDP.
No,
NAM is like literally the the countries which aren't as economically powerful.
Rahul, it's what India was in the 1980s. For the 1980s generation, when you had all these leaders from across the world descending both for NAM and Chogam, Mrs. Gandhi made it a sign of India being sort of the leader of the NAM movement, being an important player in Chogam.
The economically less developed countries,
sure, but
Prime Minister Modi, on the other hand, is signaling through G20 that India has arrived on the world stage as a major power, as an equal to some of the biggest countries and economies of the world. It's a very different projection.
No, but
he's not looking to lead the non-aligned world. He's looking to lead the world as the Vishwamitra.
He is looking also to get political benefit out of it. And the political benefit that he hopes to get is the Indian middle class, which has grown exponentially between the 1980s and today, will be razzled and dazzled by exactly what you said, that we have arrived on the global stage. So I think there is a political message, not just in the manner that Geeta explained very well about going to Jammu and Kashmir, saying, look, we are staging a big global event in Jammu and Kashmir, taking it to even non-BJP ruled states, which I think was important.
But that's a bit unfair, because if you, for example, see the kind of effort that happened in the B20, which is the Business 20, where we'd gone this morning, whether it's in Chandrasekharan of Tata Sons, the whole Sajjan Jindal, Sunil Bharti Mittal, the whole lot of corporate leaders, the manner in which corporates have been involved, startups have been involved, tourism has been involved, they've really put a lot of heart and soul in this. Political benefit may be a side effect, but they've really gone all out to try and genuinely ensure that India sweats this presidency much more than countries in the past have.
It's also because, remember in the 1980s, when these big multilateral events were organized in India, we were a 3% economy. We were an economy growing at the so-called Hindu rate of growth. Today, we are an economy hoping to become the third largest in the world. So I think it's changed, the optics have changed, but a lot of G20 is, the point I'm making is about the political optics to send out the message, not just to the world, but also to a domestic audience, that India has arrived on the world stage, and then use that.
No, but there are genuine big ideas. For example, bringing the African Union into the G20. That's India wanting to show that it is a Vishwamitra to the world, a friend to the world, and wanting to lead or include the African Union in the G20 agenda. For example, wanting to reform multilateral development banks or pushing ahead on sustainable development goals. There's a lot of genuine effort. I mean, to link everything to politics is a bit unfair. Politics may be a consequential impact of what happens, but that's not what's driving this.
We will know, we can give an informed judgment on what benefits G20 has had in the years ahead. I'm talking about here and now.
I'm talking about the effort. I'm talking about the effort
is undoubted. The effort is in the number of events that you've organized from Nagaland to Goa. That's never happened. When you had Chogam Nam, it was just a single event. I think the genius of this government has been the ability to use what is, in a way, a routine rotational membership to project to the world that India has arrived. I mean, that is where they've succeeded.
But
I think that's the success.
Also bringing in a lot of important subjects and topics: climate change, women's empowerment, in the manner in which the Indian administration is pushing. These are very important subjects that other countries do not really focus on.
Rajdeep, I think you're being unfair. To stamp on the world the Indian vision of things. For example, the importance being given to the global south. The impact, the Prime Minister says he wants it to be a catalyst of a new world order, which is not led just by a few countries in Europe and the United States, to actually rearrange global banks like the World Bank, the WTO. So there's a lot of effort that's going in that, which it's a little unfair to compare it directly to domestic politics.
I am only saying
a new world. I'll give you an example, Rahul.
Yeah, please go ahead.
One example is that Prime Minister Modi keeps talking about cooperative federalism, but when you see all the 200 events in 50 cities in all the states, whether it's BJP-ruled or non-BJP-ruled states, you only see Modi's hoardings. So the cooperative federalism, where state governments should have been more involved.
Respond to that. Should they have also got Siddaramaiah, say some of the other, like a Bhupesh Baghel, if something is happening in Chhattisgarh, should it have been more cooperative if it is actually non-political? Let Mr. Kaju respond to that.
Look, two things there. One, I don't think that the presence of G20 delegates, who are after all middle-level delegates in most cases, impacts the world as such. It impacts India, and if it was impacting India, then of course it should have involved everyone. But here I would make just 2 points. One, the manner in which Mr. Modi did project G20 right from the beginning, from the day India assumed its G20 presidency, showed an enormous amount of political imagination. It was diplomatically, this was unique, but I don't think that it really impacted the chanceries of the world. And certainly, it did not go beyond the chanceries of the world. Second, is that you are right, and Geeta mentioned that the outcome document is a very important thing. And Mr. Modi realizes, and I'm sure Jaishankar realizes, he's been in this game long enough to realize that it will be extremely difficult to come to a consensus document. In the ministerial meetings, they've been taking the shield of what was achieved at Bali and reproducing the Bali paragraphs as far as Ukraine is concerned. Now, that can't be done at the summit level. So, in order to bypass that, you are projecting yourselves as the leaders of the South, global South, and pressing the issues of the global South, and therefore saying we are transforming the world.
Okay, let Vijay Chauthaiwala respond to the critique that if this is truly non-political, if this is truly about all of India, why wasn't the opposition involved in some of these functions? Why was it only one party and one leader? Let him respond to that. Mr. Chauthaiwala.
On the other side, Rahul, when is the last time the events have been organized at so many places in so many different parts of the country? It only shows that the government was very keen and is still keen to bring everyone, every stakeholder on board. And as someone has said, most probably Rajdeep has said, that many Congress government chief ministers have also put their hoardings, etc. But essentially, in the participatory democracy, all the sections of the society have been invited in different engagement groups. I myself, I was involved in the Y20 to a little extent, and there are more than 200 small and big group events with the college students have been taken place all over the India. When is the last time the G20 and the objectives were discussed at such a grassroots level? So this is, don't go by only one parameter, whether some chief minister or one.
The good news for me was when I happened to be in Mumbai during a G20 meeting that was going on, and pollution levels had drastically come down because all other construction
and look at all the construction that's happening
for a couple of days, which is great.
Projects which would have taken years are being wrapped up in weeks.
And that's
so that
often
benefits all of us.
That's often happened.
That's not politics, that's just good for citizens.
No, when the Commonwealth Games happened in Delhi, that dramatically transformed infrastructure. But Salman,
with a lot of corruption thrown in. With a lot of corruption thrown in at that time.
Look, the fact at the end of the day is whenever a big event has taken place in India, it benefits society in general because you get infrastructure put in that otherwise doesn't come. But I thought
No, but you can't compare that.
No,
CWG was a lot of wasteful expenditure with massive, colossal corruption thrown in.
There are two ways to look at CWG. CWG, as any athlete will tell you, you speak to any sports organizer, was a dramatic transformation in India's idea of how it saw itself in global sport. That was the takeoff point. The corruption was the terrible dark point of it. The advantage of it was it gave India the belief, the self-belief that it could go across the world. India's performance in the last 15 years
but you've now
is much
had
better.
the same infrastructure development without charges of corruption.
Well, that to my mind is because at the end of the day, as of now, the Modi government has not been, there has been no visible scam that has been found. Whether the media has not inquired into it or whether none exists is another matter. But I thought the interesting aspect is what Geeta said about Kashmir, and Salman sources from Kashmir. Will you recognize that you've used G20, and I think that's the creative use by the Modi government of G20 to send out a message to the world that post the abrogation or effective abrogation of Article 370, Kashmir too could organize a G20 event. Do you, as an opposition leader, now celebrate that we've reached out to every corner of the country through G20?
Well, this is not just about Kashmir, but events were organized in Kashmir before Article 370 abrogation. I'm sorry, please do not convey the wrong kind of impression to the people in the country, because people might think that nothing used to happen in Kashmir. In fact, there used to be elections.
I didn't say nothing, but a mega event did take place. This was a big event, a global event.
Rajdeep, I've listened to all of you. Please patiently listen to me. Okay, I know you've been having a discussion, now listen to me. You've not had elections in Kashmir, J&K since 2014. It's almost 10 years. That's a shameful thing. Okay? You talk about G20, but you do not talk about basic democracy. What are you guys talking about? Now, Rahul talks about no corruption. Rahul should spend some time, investigating what's happened in the Home Ministry. Maybe you guys should be reporting more on what's happened by the CAG's reports on massive corruption in the BJP, in this government, in the Modi government. And by the way, you may talk about this as a political masterstroke and all that. We should all be happy that India is presiding over the G20 this time, and there are a lot of good things have happened. And as far as foreign policy is concerned, I've already said we're all in this together. But Mr. Modi does make everything about himself. Look at what he did to the ISRO scientists, when we should have been looking at that countdown clock to see the rover actually land on the moon. At that moment, we were looking at Mr. Modi. With all the money advantage, all the media advantage that Mr. Modi has, everything is about Modi, including in the G20. The difference between the NDA and the India alliance in your survey is just 2 percentage points, and we're 8 months away.
There was an RTI in July which said that government incurs expenses of rupees 50.6 crores on outdoor ads that were contracts given to 100 advertising companies. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying, is that publicity about India, as you're saying? Is it about Prime Minister Modi and his political outreach? Or is it, what is that publicity for? Could we have done this without the hoardings, the hype?
Let
Is a
Vijay
question that is being asked.
Vijay Chauthaiwala respond.
Can I just go back to Salman's source just once, Salman? You're talking about events being held in Kashmir. The difference over here, and I'd just like to point that out, is the fact that in the past, nobody would go to Kashmir if it's an official engagement from the OIC. The Arab world has a different view on Kashmir. This time around, when the G20 event was being organized, there were countries who represented themselves, one. Those who could not represent themselves because they have stature at the OIC and did not want to look bad on the policy of Kashmir at the OIC, did send private representatives from the tourism sector because that was a tourism event. So that's the difference where India has, this is not critiquing or praising, but I'm just saying this is the difference where the Arab world has started looking at India differently and dehyphenating the whole issue of Kashmir when it comes to engaging India.
Let me respond to that.
Please.
Very quick response.
Look, there has been a movement. India's foreign policy has evolved. Mr. Kajju will testify to that. This is all part of a continuum. But, Geeta, what I would request you, Rajdeep, Rahul, and everybody else on this panel, and those watching us, to reflect on, is that we talk so much about G20 and being held everywhere, especially Kashmir, but we do not reflect on an assembly election since 2014. What is wrong in Kashmir and J&K that we cannot have an assembly election for 10 years? Come on, you people, where are your priorities? Where are the country's priorities?
I think there can be no going away from the fact that there should be elections.
No, 2000.
He's talking about assembly elections. The last assembly elections, if I'm not mistaken, in Kashmir, were held in 2014 end.
14 end. And
That's
Jammu
right.
Kashmir assembly term is for 6 years. It's not for 5 years.
But they haven't had an election.
I get it, but the term ends. I mean,
But
technically,
you're talking about the years,
2020 तक तो वैसे भी election नहीं होना था. What I'm simply trying to
Point
say
taken,
is
okay.
not that way.
Point
Yeah.
taken. Okay. We are focusing on India's big foreign policy challenges and how the Modi government's handling of it is perceived in the Mood of the Nation poll done by CVoter. Rahul.
Let's spend a moment on how respondents in this Mood of the Nation opinion poll look at the handling of the relationship with China, Pakistan, America, and Russia. So I'll start with the question on the border incursions from China and what respondents in this poll over a time graph think of how the government has done. In August 2023, 53% of the respondents, 2 more than the last survey, think the government's handling of the China border situation has been very well and satisfactory. The numbers for those who think it's just satisfactory are 26. Those who think the government's handled China's border situation poorly are at 9%. So the big number, of course, there is 53. And if you see from the past polls of January 2022, from 46, 44, 51, it's kind of being nudging upwards. After this, let's come to the next question about whether we should be having talks with Pakistan and how respondents in our survey have reacted to this question. Only 27% of the respondents at this moment feel that India should be having talks with Pakistan. A massive 56% of the respondents think that India ought not to be talking to Pakistan. So again, very much in alignment with the thinking within the Modi government. Who is a better friend of India, Russia or the United States? When this question was asked in this poll, and remember, India has been friendlier with the USSR in its initial years. Now, however, the response in this survey has 26% saying USA is a better friend, 31% saying Russia is a better friend. What do you make of that, Ambassador Kaju? The fact 31% of the respondents in this Mood of the Nation opinion poll, despite everything that's happened, seem to think Russia is a better friend for India than the United States.
I think that's a historical memory of the Russians, which is in the old days the Soviets, standing by us in our times of need, because it's not very clear what is the eighth segment of the people who have responded to. The 31%, I suspect, may be very much the older people who have memories of the time when Russia stood by us, when the whole world, the Western world, was against us. But it's important, Rahul, if you permit me to say, that the Modi government has been able to project its China policy and its Pakistan policy with such with such shrewdness, and that it has gained popularity. I personally believe that its Pakistan policy is absolutely right at the moment. As far as its China policy is concerned, I think they've handled it skillfully on the ground, and perhaps even more projected it more proficiently than previous governments have been able to project their foreign policy position. So it's been a
Right.
combination of both.
Yashwant Deshmukh, it's easy perhaps to ask respondents the question, who will you vote for? How do you ask questions, who is a better friend for India, Russia, or the United States? Do you believe such questions often do not get the kind of responses you want? How do you target your audience on these tricky foreign policy issue questions?
Well, let me tell you, Rajdeep, that my 28 years of mapping public perception has humbled me every time I have gone to the public, thinking that they would not answer and they would not know. And I have come back humbled that they do know, they have a firm and clear opinion on each of them. And trust me, I have run many foreign affairs related thorough surveys in recent past, particularly more so ever since the Ukraine crisis happened. The clarity of thought, yes, I agree with the panelists and say that there is some deviation on the age group side. There is a larger affinity of the older age group towards Russia and more towards Americans in the younger generation. But overall, Russia is not seen the way Americans would like to see Indians at Russia.
Okay.
All right. It's very clear. What they think we should be thinking about Russia, we are not thinking like that. For them, it is okay. At the point of crisis, many times, a collective memory of Indians is Russia is a friend. And that does not mean that a crisis in Ukraine, that is our crisis. Somehow, it also helps them in deciding from the news reports that, okay, this crisis is somehow also ending up getting us fuel which is cheaper. People are consuming news to great extent, and to think that they will not have an informed opinion on that, no, they have. And I get back every time I design a questionnaire, Rajdeep, I feel, no, we are not going to get response on that. We do get response, and by God, kind of explanation that people give for their rationale behind saying a simple yes or no to any question, that boggles me down.
Okay, let me bring in on that critical question of border intrusion from China, because China is back in the news. You had the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President together in the same room at the BRICS summit, and now there's a battle of words as to who wanted to meet whom first between the two sides. The fact is, as per our poll, in January 2022, 46% said the Modi government, the center, was handling it well. It's now up to 53%. So we've seen over the last 18 months an improvement. Poorly has gone down from 17% to 9%. The fact, though, on the ground, Vijay Chautai Wale, there is no visible sign of disengagement of the kind that we would have hoped for. Do you believe that the government, in your view, China remains a tricky issue for the Modi government, Vijay?
It definitely remains one of the important issues in India's foreign policy agenda. But the way Prime Minister Modi and his government has stood up against the border situation and did not bog down as Pandit Nehru has done, unlike Pandit Nehru has done in 1962, has definitely raised the morale of this country. And this is a game of patience, and we are definitely playing it very carefully with all our cards at the chest and opening it whenever it is required. And at the end, there will be negotiations, and the negotiated settlement is what is the desired outcome. But we are not going to come bogged down by any external pressure, and that is what Indian people are appreciating.
You want to respond to that, Salman Soz, because we've heard, we've heard Rahul Gandhi targeting this government time and again on China. Even when he was in Ladakh recently, he targeted the government on China. As per our poll, 53% are saying the centers handle the border intrusions very well.
Well, I cannot speak for those who've responded to the survey, but I can say this. I did not know that the government has a new policy of strategic patience, as Vijayji seems to be enunciating here. The fact of the matter is that the Prime Minister, in I don't know what wisdom he applied, basically said that there has been no intrusion into Indian soil. Now, if that is true, then in April of 2020, in May of 2022, the army chief said...
No, Salman, there is an intrusion in 1962 where more than 40,000 kilometers, square kilometers have
one
been
by one so that the
exceeded
audience can hear more.
to China by
I'll get you
Nehru.
to
So talk
okay, I'll
about
let
it
you
first.
respond, but Salman, finish your point and I want to go to Geeta.
I did not interrupt anyone. I should not be interrupted. This is not fair.
Go ahead, finish your point.
On May 9, 2022, the army chief said that we want status quo ante as of May 2020, April 2020. Now, what is that status quo ante? What is it? Why do we need to go back to April 2020? What happened then? What are we looking for? If nobody has entered our land, then what are we asking for? Is it true that 26 out of 65 patrolling points in eastern Ladakh, we do not have access to them anymore? If that is the case, have we not lost territory? And if you ask any, look at independent observers, they will tell you that India has lost 2,000 square kilometers in this episode. Well, I won't even talk about what's happened in Doklam. Now, the question is, if the government is going to be not transparent with the people have a right to question them. Now, in your survey...
But the people are but you're making a political argument. You're making a political argument that you should. I'm just saying what our survey seems to suggest, that 53% feel the government has handled it very well.
That is perhaps a result. That is perhaps a result of the government basically clamping down on being totally opaque, not being accountable, not being responsive. So if the government is going to do that, it is our job as the opposition to make sure that the country is made aware of any threats to our national security. If the government is not going to come clean, we have to hold the government accountable. That is the opposition's role. That is what we're going to do. That is what we will do throughout our tenure till we get the government back.
Geeta Mohan, you want to respond on how you are seeing this playing out? Do you believe issues like China? Vijay, just half a second. Geeta, you want to make a point on how do you see the government handling China as an issue going ahead? There is still a question mark whether President Xi will be here. We hope he will be here at the G20 summit. Do you believe that this government is pursuing what is being called patience with the Chinese at the moment?
Well, if you see the initial reactions from 2020 onwards, Rajdeep, the reactions of India was rather harsh. No business, banning apps, banning not doing business, so on and so forth. And slowly, when we saw the trade figures come in, the trade had increased manifold, which means that there was a realization that while the world is talking about resilient supply chain, alternatives, and India becoming the next manufacturing hub, it is not so today. So India is back to engaging China, back to becoming very careful on statements with regards to China. And we're seeing that shift. We've seen that shift with Jai Shankar when a question was asked about banning apps and then doing trade. And why are we still doing trade with China? Where he said that, well, they're still not absolutely dispensable and we need China for our manufacturing sector. So we've seen that shift in India's policy towards China from a hard ban and stopping everything to now engaging, talking. But will it really or yield results is something we'll have to see. One quick question on a lighter note to Yashwant. When you put out this question, how has the center handled border intrusions from China? Which sector, Yashwant, are we talking about? The western sector?
No,
the middle sector where there are none?
No, we asked a generic question, and there is one caveat which I would like to say. I think when we talk about asking how government has handled, a lot of the goodwill also goes with the armed forces, how they people, the virals, the things, So that kind of, that sentiment comes in. It's not just the government or not just the prime minister. I think how as a country we have handled the China thing.
Rajdeep.
Yeah.
It's not the center.
It's not just the center.
People stand by the army.
Exactly.
Therefore, that comes to the question, when a political party like the Congress has aggressively taken up the China issue, is it then seen, is it possible for the government to say you're targeting the army and the armed forces? We've heard that before, and Vijay Chautaiwala, you wanted to respond to Salman Soos, who was making the point as a politician, he believes this government is being opaque, not telling the country the truth about what is the situation on the border.
Rajdeep, Mr. Salman wants to open us our strategic issues, and tomorrow he may even ask us that tell us where our border forces, in what number and what equipment they are posted on the border across China or for that matter Pakistan. Is it the way to deliver the foreign policy or ask the question? And if he wants to ask the question about occupation, let us start with Pandit Nehru, who has given up 40,000 square meter of land to China, donated, and he had a very derogatory statement against the people of
Vijay,
Arunachal.
while you go back, while you are entitled to go back to Pandit Nehru, there will be those who will ask, Vijay, just a minute, there will be those who will ask that the same Prime Minister who reached out to China on more than one occasion, whether in Ahmedabad, whether in Mahabalipuram, he was on a swing with the Prime Minister. Have you got your China outreach wrong? You moved from banning Chinese apps to now saying let's talk to the Chinese.
Absolutely not. No, we never said we will not talk to the Chinese. Have we ever said? And as far as trade is concerned, yes, on certain critical things, we are still dependent on imports of China. But except that, we have not given any excessive generosity to China, which previous governments have given. And I can give you thousands of examples in the Congress government, which they have shown a very lenient attitude towards our adversaries, not only China, but also to Pakistan. And that we have faced very serious consequences because of that.
Quick response,
so
Salman Soos, and then Mr. Kaju wanted a response too. Quick response, Salman.
I just want to say to Vijay ji and to everybody watching that this government, if the government has an excellent policy, amazing policy, and they're only restricting, relationships with China in certain areas, I fail to understand how India is running a record trade deficits with China. We imported $100 billion worth of goods from China. $100 billion. That it boggles the mind. I don't understand what they're doing.
That's a legacy.
Maybe they know what they're doing.
That's a legacy.
This is a matter that we should be. They talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat. I think my friend Shashi Tharoor said they have basically Paramatma Nirbhar Bharat. That is what they're doing.
Okay, let Mr. Kaju, who silently listened to both of you and is caught in the middle, give a final word.
Look, China is India's greatest strategic challenge. It requires that a consensus be developed within our political and strategic classes on how to deal with China. It should not be a matter of politicking as we have seen in the debate today, and I'm saying this with deep regret. There has to be a reach out from the government as well as a reach out from the opposition to sit together to evolve a consensus on China. It is vital for our future. We can't go, on the one side, Mr. Chautaiwala is going back to Pandit Nehru. On the other side, Mr. Soos is raising issues about the present government's policy. The fact is that the consensus which was reached, or the agreements that were reached with China in the 1990s have broken down. A new policy has to emerge. And that policy has to, if it has to be sustainable, it has to carry the whole country with it. Yes, it is good today. One last sentence.
Okay.
It is good today that the majority of the people are supporting the government. And as you rightly said, there's the national element of supporting the army. But that is not sufficient. We've got to have a comprehensive policy, a whole of government, whole of nation approach on China.